Hey everybody, Christo, your mining coach, and what a wonderful morning for me today. I am with Charné Cooper. I've known her for a few years, and what a privilege to have Charné, woman in mining. And I'm going to ask her to jump right in, introduce herself. I know this woman. It's such a privilege. Charné, welcome to the Mining Coach podcast. I'm excited to have you with us today. And I'm sure our listeners and our viewers are going to have a blast of a time today. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Christo. I'm doing amazing. Thank you. Happy to be part of the show. Excited to have this and engage in this discussion. I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Charné, I'm not going to do the introduction of who Charné Cooper. I would like you to tell our listeners, our viewers, a little bit about yourself, your mining career up to this point.
Okay, so I'm Charné Cooper. I am a mining engineer by profession. I've been in the industry, I think, just over 5 years now, so still relatively new in the business. I started off my journey in a mining consultancy for mining and environmental consulting on various mines in Namibia. And then I transitioned to my current place of work, which is in Roshpina Zinc. And I started off in mine planning and sort of worked my way up to scheduling and monthly planning, which is my current role. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I have quite a few interests in terms of career
Yeah.
as well. I'm currently enrolled for my CAPM, so very interested in project management and that type of direction. I think it links up quite well with my current role as well.
Yes. Yeah, I saw you busy with that, and that's quite exciting. You already registered as an associate, so that's good for you. And um, it's a challenging environment for women in mining in an underground mine, or how has that been going for you?
I think starting off was quite rough, but as with everything else, one gets adjusted quite quickly. So what others see as challenging these days is just has become the day to day for us. So we've adapted quite well. I wouldn't say it's challenging. Yes, it's difficult in terms of the location and so forth, and the level of work. And I mean, it's more physical at times, but we've grown adjusted and come to quite enjoy it. I couldn't see my life anywhere else.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's and it's inspiring. And I think, as you and I spoke before the time, the purpose of this podcast is adding value to a younger version of ourselves. And I know you say you've only
Mm.
been in the industry for 5 years, but in a lot of cases, 5 years, you can have 1 year repeating itself 5 times, but you've had 5 phenomenal years of growth. You didn't just, you know, do the same thing 5 years. You've been growing a lot. And in that space, would you say there's a career in mining for women is something to go after? Do you think it's exciting?
Um, Chris, so I can definitely speak from my own experience, and as you said, it's been a really positive one. I came in as a trainee, and in terms of career progression, looking back, um, I've managed to climb up the ranks quite quickly, and I've enjoyed the process. I've dabbled in different fields within the mining industry, um, on this one site, if I can put it as such. So
Yeah.
it's been a promising and it's been a very positive experience on my end. So I would definitely recommend. Yeah, it's something to look forward to, and it's
Uh,
something that's encouraged. And I
yeah.
think if you're up for the challenge, then you'll definitely enjoy it.
Fantastic. And you chose relationships today as a topic. And why
Yes.
that?
So I was running through the list of topics, and quite honestly, Christo, I think relationships are such a fundamental part of not only your work life, but every single
Yeah.
aspect of your life. And as I saw the word, it kind of dawned on me that your relationships that you have, be it at home, be it at work, be it with God, they sort of define your experience. And like I said, I've had in my short-lived career, I've had quite a positive experience in the mining industry. And reflecting back on it, it wasn't necessarily that the work alone that I do on a daily basis that contributed to that, but it was the strong relationships I managed to form with my colleagues, with my coworkers, with with everyone around me. And it sort of gives you that support system. And like I said, your relationship determines the quality of your life, in my opinion. The relationships you form, be it wherever in the workplace or at home. And so I thought it's quite an overarching topic, and it's
Yes.
quite broad,
Yes.
and it sort of laps into every single aspect of one's life. And if you
Yeah.
get your relationships right, then I think you create a very happy and positive space for yourself at the end of the day.
It's amazing that you say that, because as you were talking, I'm thinking about, we as engineers, we end up doing engineering because we love the numbers and the science behind it, and it's
Yeah.
not a very people orientated like field.
Mm.
And I remember when I was going through my engineering studies, they forced us to work in teams and groups, and they said a lot of your work one day is going to be team orientated. And you've just touched on
Mm.
that. It's so critical to anybody in making a success of a career, to have those solid relationships. And yeah, thank you for this topic. I'm really excited to discuss this.
Yeah, just maybe to add
Yeah,
to what you
please.
just said, Christo.
Yes.
Thinking out loud, we were having a discussion the other day, and just talking about personal fulfillment and what brings you joy and those types
Yes.
of conversations. And a light bulb sort of went off to say that up to a certain point, I think in your career and in your life, you chase certain things, be it
Yes.
material things or money or personal development.
Yeah.
But at some point, you get to a point where you really just enjoy good company culture. You really enjoy having a boss that acts as a mentor as well. You really enjoy fulfilling relationships with your coworkers and people that you can count on and that can count on you and that you can trust and that can trust you in return. So I think as you progress in your career and as you get older, you put more emphasis on that side of things. And I think that's why this topic was quite a good one for me, because I quite like the idea, or something that would enjoy
Yeah.
discussing. Mhm.
And we spend so much of our time with people at work. I mean, it's not as if we spend all this time at home. We spend this time with colleagues every day. And if you
Yeah.
don't have those solid relationships, and if you don't enjoy working with these people, it can become a difficult place.
Yeah, and I think you can even go as far as saying it affects the bottom line at the end of the day, because
Yes.
it definitely talks to the numbers if the dynamic in the team is not right and who someone is not talking to this one. And i- if the relationship isn't right, I am sure if someone mines the data, they'll find somewhere along the lines that it affects the bottom line at the end of the day, which is what
Yeah.
we're all chasing. And yeah.
And mine is a difficult place where it's so quickly get people into silos, the different departments working on their own, and they're chasing their own objectives.
Yeah.
And have you found that
Mhm.
as well in your career so far?
No, definitely, Christo. I think that's one thing that a lot of companies have in common, not only in mining, I think throughout,
Yes.
is that silos between departments, and how do you breach that, and how do you create a unified front? And let's not stand for individual departments, but let's stand for RPZC in my case as a whole.
Yes.
So that's definitely something that's very prominent. And I think one of the key elements there is sort of pinpointing what can we do to breach these gaps. How can we get that unified approach? How can we motivate the team to have a different perspective and a different outlook? Because like I said, there's a lot of dynamics in different teams,
Mm.
and it's quite crucial to understand those dynamics and try and have open and honest discussions. And I think the big one that we saw is just creating a platform, be it just a simple meeting or discussion where we have the different shareholders or the different stakeholders and we get input, and everyone can air their frustration or their joy or their recognition for the day. And at the end of the day, everyone feels heard and seen, and
Mm.
it everyone's opinions have been taken into account. Everyone gives buy-in, and off you go. You've already sort of slowly but surely breached a little gap, and
Yeah.
created that unity within the sections.
It's a topic that a lot of people talk about today. What you've just mentioned is inclusivity. That's what it is,
Mm-hmm.
including people in, the different viewpoints and the diversity of those teams. But what are the secrets? I mean, let's get a little bit more practical. Can you share
Mm.
with us examples of what you've done to breach those gaps between departments? And you don't have to,
Yeah.
mention people's names, but
The
yeah, I'm
specifics.
sure, I'm sure
No,
you won't do
I
that. But
think, yeah, no, Christo, I think the big one, like I said, is firstly what we've seen works quite well. Um, because mining is quite dynamic and it's very interdependent. I would even go as far as saying it's one of the most interdependent industries that you have because of the fact that everything depends on everything.
yes,
So based on that, I think what has worked for us quite well is frequent engagements and discussions, like I said, and including all respective parties. You tend to step on quite a few toes when you have discussions in your little hurdles or in the corridors or in and I think that happens a lot in organizations where you gather around and you touch on something quickly, but you haven't discussed with
yes,
some of the critical players within the discussion. So that steps on toes. So I think what we try and do is just be aware of the dynamic, like I said, and how everyone fits into the story, and try and incorporate everyone into the discussions where they are required, and facilitate those discussions, have open and honest discussions, and create a platform where I always find so much joy in having a platform where we can sort of be open and honest, and we don't need to agree in terms of our opinions. We
yes,
can disagree and we can dispute, but once we exit the meeting or we leave the boardroom, then we've come to consensus, and we've sort of we've reconciled. We've Nothing was taken personal, and we've had open discussions, and we can move on professionally. So I think just facilitating those types of discussions and having that full integration. I know in terms of integration, what a lot of companies are doing now is the whole
yes,
open plan spaces and trying to
yeah,
get everyone within the same space. I think the verdict is still not out on how that works. There's a bit of back and forth there, but that's another approach that some teams have taken, and I
yeah,
think they've seen good results.
mm,
And even simple things like team building practices within your department, within the mine itself, um, all of that contributes to the greater good, and I think all of that creates that unity within the team. And yeah.
yeah. Maybe just sharing a story or something personal, and that brings that unity in a team. Yeah, I've had so much wonderful experiences with team building. Just being able to, yeah, just voice yourself, and as you say, you can speak your mind, and sometimes you don't always have to agree. Um,
Mm,
Now, I know the answer to this, and you know the answer, and I guess all of our listeners know the answer to what I'm going to ask, but relationship is an accelerator to your career. There's no doubt about that. And
yeah.
how can you motivate somebody today that's really struggling? They have this one person or this one department or a specific person in that department. And you spoke about, I think you touched on emotional stuff as well. Uh, how can what's your advice to a person struggling to really breach that gap? They really have an issue with somebody or a department.
Okay. So in terms of maybe starting with the fact that the acceleration in one's career, I think a lot of a lot of it is not uh, thoroughly attributed, or enough of it is not attributed to the relationships you built. Um, Maybe starting off, I think in terms of technical knowledge and all of the hard skills,
Hmm,
I wouldn't say easy, but once you have them right.
that's
Um, I think a relationship, forming strong relationships with, like I said, there's so many informal mentorships and so many informal coaching sessions that only after a day or two, when you sit and reflect, then you realize, oh no, this guy gave me really valuable information that I can apply for the rest of my life. And at the end of the day, I think nothing beats experience. So coming in as a graduate or someone that's struggling to progress or trying to breach the gap, I think it's very important to sort of have an open mind and know that you don't know everything and there's always a lot to learn, and take take a more humble approach when dealing with, I think, more experienced people. Because Christo, in
Yes.
my experience, I've noticed that it's unbelievable, the wealth of knowledge that you get from 20 years in the business. And people are quite willing to share that information. Everyone is actually excited and eager to have someone to tell it to. So if you just listen attentively and be mindful when they speak to you, you'll end up with a bucket full of knowledge when you walk out of that boardroom that you weren't expecting at all. And that takes me back to this informal mentorship and coaching sessions that you only after the fact even realize you've been through a coaching session. And all of that for all of that to happen, you should have those strong relationships in place, and have good working relationships in place to get that knowledge transfer and get that exposure. And yeah, so
That's
again, I
fantastic.
think
Yeah.
mm,
Oh, well, you're mentioning so many nuggets there, and I'm just sitting here inspired by, how you've grasped these issues in a very, call it, early stage of your career. It took me, I can tell our listeners, it took me a lot longer to figure all of this out. I didn't get it as quickly as you did, which is why you're on the show. I mean, a lot of our listeners, they they are quite aggressive about being successful, and that's why they are listening now. Maybe they, in the gym somewhere, or riding a bike, or taking the dogs for a walk, because they listen to this podcast to grow and to learn. And you've just given us an amazing couple of nuggets there.
mm.
You've also spoken about relationships outside of work. Would you like to talk to that a little bit? How important is that for you?
Oh, I think that's definitely the most important, because those are the relationships that fill your cup, right? Those are the things that wake you up in the morning and inspire you to be your best self. And I think by my nature, I'm very inclined to having good, strong relationships with especially my family. Um, so my family, my husband, my siblings, we have rock solid relationships, and I really think you draw a lot of strength from the people in your life. And if you get that very core circle right,
Mm,
and the key people in your life, and you have that encouragement, and you have that positivity, and you have someone to sort of put things in perspective when you can't, then it's your cup overflows at the end of the day, because there's just so much coming in, and you're just ready to face the day after whatever you've gone through after a difficult week. So those relationships are quite key. And I think above all that sits the relationship with God. I'm quite a firm believer. I'm a Christian. So
okay.
I think I draw a lot of strength from my faith. And that relationship as well, like any other, takes work, and it takes patience, and it takes dedication. And it's not something you just hop into one day when you're in the mood and the next you're out. It's building those relationships, like I said, so that you can wake up every day with a new sense of self and a replenished self.
Okay. Well, there you hear the mining equipment in the background. So Charné is at the mining site, and talking about these relationships and external. I've always had been a firm believer, like yourself, to say your company won't visit you at 75 years old, sitting somewhere, enjoying your retirement, if you're going to retire at that age. But your family, your close family, your inner circle, maybe your children, grandchildren, they will visit you if you've had those relationships intact during your working career. And
Yeah.
is that a difficult balance for you to get that right? Work,
Oh,
family.
definitely, Christo. Definitely. I think
Have you got some
I've drawn
tips?
some inspiration from you. I think you've touched on it before, and it's something that kind of stuck in the back of my mind, because getting that balance right, especially in mining, is quite difficult, because I mean it's a 24-hour operation. So you could find yourself unknowingly at times you find yourself sitting with a laptop, and it's 9:15 in the evening, and you've
Yeah,
barely even acknowledged the people around you. So it's quite a difficult balance to strike.
yeah,
um, but I think once you have the core of where your priorities lie and where your focus is and what you want, and you focus, you assign your time with respect to those priorities, then I
Wow.
think it becomes a bit easier. It's still quite a difficult a difficult balance to strike, and I think it will always be work to strike that balance. But yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Um, this is we're just going to take a pause here. Yeah. Sorry about that. We had to have a short break there for a moment. Charné, thanks yeah, just I'm having so much fun today with this conversation. We've touched on these relationships externally, internally, but communication is an art, and you are an exceptional communicator. I've had the privilege working with you and seeing how well you communicate. Was this always something you did well, or it doesn't just happen by itself, I'm sure. Tell us a little bit about this journey of communication skills that you've got.
So thank you first of all, Christo. I'm definitely not one of those natural get out of bed and off I go communicators.
Me
It
too.
has been quite a it has been quite a journey, unfortunately, or fortunately rather. I think in terms of my career progression, if I reflect on it, prior to getting into the mine itself, even in the consultancy firm, I think I've always found myself in very fortunate positions, which at the time probably didn't seem like fortunate positions because I felt a lot of pressure. But looking back, it was definitely a force in the right direction. I've always managed, or I've always been surrounded by a lot of positive influences. I think yourself included, Christo, that sort of push you to come out of your comfort zone and do things where you're just like, oh my goodness, I will not survive this day. And then you survive the day, and then you survive tomorrow, and then later it's really not that bad. So I think again, a lot of positive influence around you. One can get so stuck, and I say this quite honestly, Christo. I didn't like communicating at all. If you tell me do a presentation, I would want to run for the hills, like I think most people do.
Yes.
And the only way to breach that is unfortunately to jump in the deep end. And I think I at times jumped and at times I was pushed, but at the end of the day, it worked to my benefit. So
Yeah.
yeah, one definitely doesn't just wake up one day and,
Yes.
or at least I don't know about you, Christo. Maybe
No.
you wake up and it starts
No.
flowing, but I think it's definitely a process and it takes time. And I've one of the secrets, or something that I like to do is in these difficult places or difficult situations where you
Yes.
find yourself sort of surrounded by more experienced, more competent, more just more professional or higher up professionals than yourself. What always helps is sort of to just peep over and see, okay, how is he addressing the crowd, how is he starting the conversation, or how is she going to start this conversation, or how are they going to break the ice if something, like there's so many different dynamics, and like I said, small things that you can pick up on and hopefully just keep in the back of your mind to apply one day, to say, okay, no, if someone says something wrong, maybe I can, or what I see people do is giggle and make a joke and give the person that's speaking a chance to relax. So there's different things that again, through informal coaching, that you pick up on,
Yes.
and you can only strive to someday be where they are. For now, you can mimic and you can try and you can learn, and then hopefully in a few years you'll get it right.
Fake it until you make it type of thing.
Fake it until you make it.
But you've mentioned a nugget there, and just for our listeners and our viewers, what Shanae's just said, just be willing to jump into the deep end. That's profound. That's phenomenal, because it does seem, Shanae, for you, you've become comfortable being uncomfortable, and you saw that as growth. Is that true?
No, Christo, that's one of the things I live by, and I think we often have this conversation even at home, and it will always come up where someone says like, no, if you go home, for example, and you complained, this is now back in the day when I was still in school, and you're like, no, I really hate this. I don't want to do this today. I don't want to swim. I don't want to partake in this competition. And then someone would always make a comment and say, only when you're uncomfortable, then you know you're growing. So
Yeah.
if you're not uncomfortable, then it means you're stagnant. So
Yes.
I always keep that in the back of my mind. And I think it's more difficult, sometimes easier said than done.
Yes.
But those difficult situations have taken a lot of things that I considered an obstacle. Like, for example, maybe standing in front of a big crowd and talking I would have seen it as one of the biggest obstacles 2, 3 years back. And
Yes.
today it's maybe just a minor a minor obstacle, if I can call it that.
Yeah.
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 So and how else would you get to that point if not exposed, right?
Mm.
And I think the safe thing to do is just to remain in your bubble and try and avoid it and try and avoid it. But it's unfortunately in the world of today, it's something that you have to get around. And
Yeah.
it's becoming more engaging, and it's becoming a lot of the focus is more on the softer skills. And I think that's another takeaway. Like I said, you are so technically skilled when you start a job, and even the technical experience, you pick up quite fast, because I mean, you've just come out of an engineering or geology or whatever degree, so you're relatively smart-ish. So you pick up those things quite fast, but then a lot of the things that you don't pick up or that you aren't exposed to as much
Yeah.
is the softer skills. And
Yes.
unfortunately, we find ourselves in a time where communication and a lot of dynamics play quite a big role in the company and the company's performance. So at the end of the day, you need to keep yourself competitive with your peers. And once you get in that comfort zone, the only concern is that you might get left behind, because everyone
That's
else
right.
is pushing their boundaries, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny, the statistics show that it's less than 10% of people that actually live in that zone where they are comfortable being uncomfortable. And even in that, it's only about 5% that really make, the top notch of career success. So for those of us that are listening, and that's why you're listening, you are doing this because you are serious about your career. Well, Shanae's just told you, just be comfortable being uncomfortable. um,
And maybe be a bit concerned, Christo, be a bit concerned if you've been comfortable for 3 consecutive months and you've had no stress coming your way. Then
yeah,
maybe, yeah.
yeah, that's fantastic. Shanae, this has been phenomenal. I think we're getting towards the end of this. Is there anything that you would like to share? Anything else that you'd like to share with the younger, maybe not even a professional, maybe just somebody that, when I say professional, let me just take my words back. I don't mean that person without a tertiary qualification is not a professional. You get fantastic people that
Yeah.
they are master operators. They are masters at whatever they do, whether it's a laboratory technician, whether it's, working in
Mm,
the processing plant, whether in procurement, you are in charge of the stockholding or whatever that is. What
mm.
is the sort of message that you want to give any person that they really want to be the best versions of themselves? And, what is the thought you want to leave us with today?
Maybe, Christo, I'll just share something that has been on my mind. Um, the most important thing that I found is know yourself enough to know how to replenish yourself. Know yourself enough to know what fills your cup. Know yourself enough to know that I need 2 days to sort of go hiking in the mountains. I need to be by myself. I need to drink a lot of water. I feel good when I do this. I feel good when I do that. I think in this fast-paced career and fast-paced world, and I think all of us are sort of, it's a hustle and a bustle. So once you have that and you know that when things get too much, or after a long week or after a month, I sort of reset by doing A, B, and C. I found quite I found it quite impressive with when I looked at the amount of energy you can come back to work with, and the amount of energy you can then pour back into your marriage and back into your relationships and
Yeah.
back into your family. um, just always make sure that your cup doesn't run empty, trying to pour into everything else. So sometimes, like I said, it's just a day or an afternoon of doing something that you enjoy. I quite like reading, so my days would probably be lounging around with a book somewhere in the house. So just know what fills your cup, and then use that to pour into others.
Oh, that's profound. That's wisdom beyond your years. And yeah, and I think it comes a lot from reading. And thank you for sharing that with us, Charné. It's been a wonderful privilege having you on our show today. And I guess people can reach out to you on LinkedIn. You've got a profile there. And thank you to our listeners for watching today and listening. Thank you, Charné. It's been a real privilege, a real honor. And I wish you all the best there at the mine site, and enjoy the rest of your day. She is at the mine site at the moment. So thank you for making this time. It's been phenomenal.
Thank you so much, Christo. Always a pleasure.
All right. You have a good day.
Same to you.
Wow. 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 So I just want to recap for me a phenomenal session with Charné. So 5 things that stand out for me from today's show. Just Charné's positive can-do attitude just towards life in general, but also just at work. There's a saying, altitude or attitude determines altitude. Number 2, our relationships define the quality of life, both inside at work and outside of work. Number 3, the mining industry is one of the most interdependent industries, and therefore our relationships is so key to affect the bottom line of the business. Number 4, nothing beats experience, but take a humble approach in learning from those experienced individuals so that you can grow and accelerate your own learning. Keep an open mind whenever dealing with experienced individuals. Number 5, know yourself well enough to replenish yourself and replenish that cup and what it is that charges your battery again, in my own words. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for watching.